Hello there. Welcome back to A Resilient Path. My name is Wayne Marinovich. I'm a resilience coach on this channel. And for a while now, I've been thinking about something that you've often heard of, people calling and talking about returning to a new normal or anything like that. And I saw this title quite a while back and it got me thinking. The world you were born into is gone. And I was giving this a lot of thought because we generally right now have 5 generations, as by my calculations. We have obviously the silent generation who are now in their hundreds. We have the boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and now Gen Alpha. Don't think any other generation that I know of or time in history have there been 5 generations alive at the same time. And, I just wanted to stop in and say there are a few things that I wanted to talk about around this issue. The main one being there is no more normal. And I think we sort of need to grieve for that and accept that it's going to change. And so I always will start something like this off with an incredible quote which has guided my thinking to understand where we are as a species on our planet. And it's by Will Durant. Civilization starts with order, grows through liberty, and dies in chaos. And I think we can all feel it. We know this intrinsically somehow, that the world we were born into is no longer what it was. It was stable. It was an era of stability. We had clear-cut rules put in place after the 2 wars. Our governance, our education, everything grew with a healthy economy. We had only 2-3 billion people at the time. So everything seemed normal. But now we have this high era of volatility. A lot of uncertainty. It's very complex. It's not easy to see behind the curtain of what's looking out and what's governing us, if you know what I'm getting to. And yeah, it's ambiguous. It's really just confusing. We don't seem to have a clear direction as a population. And so we just follow. And I think this is one of the things that I teach on this channel is resilience, is not following anymore. It's finding your own path and your family's path, but within the confines of what we're allowed to do on this planet. So to crack on, I think part of the survival forward, and I hate the word survival because it implies some kind of doom scenario that we're going to have, some apocalypse that's going to hit us. But grieving for what was is a great way to usher in what can be and what's going to be. We have a new world, and there's an old adage that coaches use. It's to look at your life. It's when you're driving in a car, you have the whole screen in front of you and a small little rear view mirror. So that's the kind of percentage. We need to be forward looking through this big, wonderful piece ahead of us, and only focus on that little mirror every now and again, just to see where we are and where we've come from. And I think that's just something we all need to get around. We can feel it's changing. We can do 2 things. We can sit and be complacent and on our couch of comfort, as I call it, or you can actively get in charge of your life and ahead of some of the things that are coming. And the major thing, I think, is something I call global trauma. We're in a world where we have 24 hours, 7 days a week, just news cycle after news cycle. We have social media that's just a tsunami of information, and it's corrupting our minds about all issues across the planet. I think we're the first era, certainly, of humanity where we feel affected by 24-hour news cycles, and we suffer this global trauma for anything that happens on the other side of the world. We feel the need to, raise our fists and stand by somebody and put a black square on our social media and show we support them, when in fact it's meaningless. We don't support them. It's something we've placed stress on ourselves, anxiety, to show support for something that will not affect us. And I think, it affects us in so many ways. Our brains are just not geared for this. If you look at 300,000 years of Homo sapiens, we've been on the planet a while, and it's a slow-moving, slow evolving brain we've got. Yet we're now in this world with diabolically quick technological advances. And it moves at such a speed that, we sort of feel like our brains feels like it's a horse, compared to a Formula One car, and we just can't seem to catch up. And that's that dissonance between the two, where we have this incredible brain, but it's struggling with everything that it's being fed. And so we know that the world is violent. We know it's corrupt. We know there's chaos. There's always been that in history. And we dealt with it in a slow fashion because our media was slower, right? We used to get newspapers and old dated things like that. And I'm not saying we need to go back to that. But I think we haven't quite understood that the chaos that we have thrown at us 24/7 on scrolling platforms means our dopamine receptors are hooked on that reward of the next one, giving you a reward. And so they're always switched on. So we just cannot switch our brains off. And there are several areas around this, and I'm going to go through them, which I think is areas that are particular you might find helpful, or just basically that are going to hit us rather fast. And the first area is around economy. It's around wealth, and particularly our careers, our career paths within that. If you look at the world right now, we've never had more debt, right? We know this. Every country is barring a few, is nearly at 100% of debt to GDP. And that means literally we are borrowing just as much as we're taking in or producing. And so we only ever paying off the interest. I mean, the globe in itself, the planet as a whole, is 235%. I've got the number somewhere. I can put a link in if it interests you. But within that though, the wealth gap has never been larger, I don't think, between the people who have a lot and the people who have nothing. And I think this is part of the reason we're seeing socialism starting to rear its head amongst everybody, because we have this GDP system which was created in 1934 by Simon Kuznets, I think I'll get my name right. It was brought into effect as a measurement for economies in Bretton Woods in 1953. And this was all around how we consume, how we produce. And because we've had so much debt, it's starting to creak. I have this old, equation. It's called GDP equals debt growth plus population growth plus productivity growth. Now, the debt is growing, our population is struggling, and productivity is struggling. Now, AI might fix the productivity, but the debt is the problem. But that doesn't matter to the individual, does it? We all have a little bit of debt, a credit card here, a mortgage, a car payment. But it's the ever-present knowledge that the wealth gap is getting bigger. But specifically, the middle class is being hollowed out at a rate of knots that we just can't seem to find feet anymore. And these are the middle class I'm talking about, are the powerhouse of all Western economies and Eastern economies, because they earn medium level salaries and they pay a lot more tax. And so the tax goes up to making the elite even richer, and it helps governments to give out to the poor. And I think that is one of the things that we're struggling with, because the GDP is an earn to consume model. It's a Ponzi scheme, a giant Ponzi scheme. We have to keep consuming. And so if the middle class is struggling, the biggest block of consumers, well, then the economy struggle and start to collapse. And I think this is one of my biggest concerns, is we are due, as sadly as it sounds, a major recession, probably a depression again, like 1929. We do something like that because it's a way that everybody takes it, right? We all lose wealth and we can zero some of the debt, or it just collapses in on itself. And I think one of the things that I was thinking about in the way that the world is so different is we used to own everything, and things could last. I mean, my parents had a fridge, a Kelvinator, which they had for 40 years. And then they moved houses, and that house had a fridge. So the old Kelvinator went into the garage and was filled with beer. And ran for another 10 years. Every time it broke, we got a guy. A guy came in, fixed it. And I think that's something, we've lost that with this consumption cycle, that everything has an obsolescence in it, right? We make things to fail. Nothing is meant to last. In that time, my parents would have had they been married, and now there would be 4 or 5 fridges. They had an old Hoover kind of, that lasted 30 years. And I understand it. We need it to keep it. We need it to break down so that we can buy a new one, so that the GDP can reflect that the economy is growing. And it's a sad thing because, I've written the book I'm busy working on, or I just finished a chapter on it, and we're literally we have refrigerator graveyards now, and I mean, come on, this is just not how we are supposed to end as a civilization, in a knee deep or chest deep in our own filth. But, that's where we are. I remember owning record collection, I still do, but many young people don't. I have a great book collection. It was physical things, everything that I owned I touched. And, now we stream everything and it's on the cloud, and we sold this convenience, but it's addicted. It's created to keep us consuming and being addictive. And I think this is one of the areas that we look at where our civilization and our health are tied to consumption, and tied to earnings, and tied to wealth. And I just published recently on about the death of purpose in an AI world. And one of the things is our purpose has become, work, our job. And so career paths, if you look at them now, they used to be this sort of upward trajectory, linear, predictable. You got one degree, you had one job for life. That's all gone. Now, unless you're multi-skilled or multi-purposed or pushing into an entrepreneur in the AI world, you're not going to make it. And I hate saying that to people. But 50, 60-year-old people who I'm coaching, I'm drumming in, start skilling, go and get another skill. If you're an accountant, go and do a year-long apprentice as an electrician. They won't mind. Get another skill. And I think that's one of the areas we can really get back into the game, if you know what I'm saying. Another issue that I have is globalists and the area of politics and geopolitics around that. And I think in COVID, the globalists, the elite, you want to call them, you heard that those terms used, bandied about all over the place, came out during lockdown with all kinds of things like the Great Reset and Build Back Better. I mean, I know. And this became pretty clear that these people, and I call them the Davos crowd, you can see them, part of the World Economic Forum, they control our national leaders and they control the money supply. And here's the thing, they have God complexes, that they are here with divine right to tell us how to live our lives and to govern us while they accumulate the wealth. And this became very, very obvious. And I don't think they know what's good for humanity, because all they have is this Ponzi scheme that filters wealth upwards. And so they get it, Another thing that we have without a doubt, and I can't name one, strong leaders. We have a dearth of absolute weaklings throughout the world, in all countries. These are career men and women who care about their own wealth, care about the power, don't care about us at all. They only care about an election cycle and saying the things and empty promises. And I think that way, now, okay, let me contradict myself here. I'm not saying that there were an abundance of great leaders in the past, but we had men and women who stood for something and could make things happen for the good of the people. Yeah, one last thing, unipolar world, and I'm just checking so I don't miss anything. It became pretty obvious as well that the unipolar world has ended, right? The hegemony of America is not ending, but it is in competition with other global empires. And so we live in a multipolar world, and this is really, really going to make things even more chaotic, more up in the air as new alliances are formed and old alliances are broken. I mean, you look at Europe now. Europe's stuck between the Far East. I'm talking Russia, India, and China, and that. And then you have the Americas, and Europe's stuck in the middle with nothing to offer. I'm doing another post on the UK, and we've been in the UK here, where I've immigrated to many years ago. It's become irrelevant. It really has become an irrelevant power in the world. I understand why the likes of Trump wants to come up with, disband the G7 and come up with a core five. I think he coined it. Politico leaked this document, of which it's the United States, Russia, China, India, and Japan, the core five. And let's be honest, there's not a European country, and then we don't deserve to be there. So it's always been a complex world, but we had rules and institutions that gave guidance along our journey in the areas of policies, career guidance, rigid life plans. Nowadays, major institutions serve only the globalist elite, thereby corrupting themselves in the process. They will all fall as we move into a multipolar world, as alliances change or break. All civilizations collapse, and the patterns that we're seeing nowadays say it'll do so again. We were promised this global village, and with all its connectivity and technology. Instead, I think we have a toxic digital tribe, or multiple toxic digital tribes, where we get only put in front of people who we agree with and vice versa. This fragmentation means that any collective action that's needed at a national, global level will fail. It feels like the world is imploding because we don't share common reality anymore. We're just trapped in this digital tribalism, and I don't think that's going to change. And I think one of the areas that I look into a lot is health. I'm talking mental health and physical health, because it's part of what I coach. And it's pretty obvious we're fat and lazy as a species now. We live off diet, of sugar, prescription meds. We're in what I always call the comfort crisis. And it's made us soft. It really has made us soft mentally and physically. We've swung from this era of, don't talk about your problems and walk it off, to a self-ascribed victimhood in a over-therapized world, where everybody needs to know your trauma, and you need to tell everybody about your childhood traumas, and so you can help each other on their journey. I get it. Stress used to be a temporary state, but now it seems that all we do is manage stress, and I think this over-therapization of the world, where we're all victims, in a self-ascribed victims, means we're constantly in a state of stress. When I was growing up, you used to go to the doctor when you were broken, right? You'd fallen out of a tree, or you'd got stitches, and you'd pay them a tenner and they'd fix you up. Now we have all these apps and wearables, which are all great, but it's making us very, very in tune with every little pain and niggle, where we just used to ignore it previously and go, oh, you know what, it's just old age or something like that. And I'm not coming across as callous here, but we just have to switch away from this absolute individualization of everything we do. Nowadays, the only plus side and where the world has changed is fitness. Used to be for vain gym rats, with a slightly masochistic streak. But now it's an incredible biohack for your health, and it's and your body's your primary hardware for the rest of your life. So if you look after it, you can live a good, mobile, long life. And we now know that if your health is failing, it's because you are neglecting it. It's not anybody else's fault. And I think this is something that people have to get used to, is we just need to take control of all aspects of our life, and we're forgetting some of the most important things, and that's our physical health. I think one of the things that COVID did change was we used to have clear boundaries between work and life, right? Our home life, and you'd come home 9 to 5. You'd switch off occasionally. You had to work one night a week, maybe one weekend at month end or something like that, or quarter end. So there was this big divorce between your personal life and your work life. Whereas now, because we work from home, we're flexible, kind of working. There's a grey area, and it doesn't seem to be any distinction or any divorce between the two. And this, I think, is placing an incredible stress on our world. And I don't see us going back, to an office environment or any segregation of this role. And because of these things, we're so in tune with that. Again, we've lost community feel. We've lost, areas of our lives where, because we become individualistic now, with our own, 15-minute channel on Instagram that is things exactly like this, we don't know our neighbors anymore. We have thousands of followers, and yet we don't know any of them. We don't care for any of them. We'll give them an emoji every now and again, a little heart, and and all of the concept is that we have generations who are more lonely than ever even though we're in this hyper-connective world. I mean, you look at the dating pool for young men and women now, it's just impossible, from what I hear, and I'm glad that I don't have to be in that pool anymore. So what can you do in this world that is now changed beyond all recognition? One of the things are 2 words, and that's opt out. And I know it sounds very sort of bland and wide sweeping, but in a world of non-stop media, Zoom calls at home, taking care of your household, managing your household, being busy all the damn time means you miss out on chances to grow, to experiment, to develop, and to actually move your life away from chaos. It's that whole thing is, when you get lost, you tend to go faster down the street that you're lost in. Or if you on a walking road, you tend to go faster when you should be taking slower. We have this natural propensity to do that. And I think a lot of it is, our social treadmill, which we're always on, the keeping up with the Joneses. A greatest skill is learning to say no, move away from the herd. And I know that's, something that we should be doing even as individuals, but because of the nature of echo chambers of social media and things like that, we think we're becoming individuals, but we're actually just part of a group of people who are identical, and so we're not our own people anymore. So our self-worth, I think, has changed dramatically in the world. We're moving away from where employment defines you, to a little bit more where you can define yourself and grow and live up to your full potential. We're moving away from the concept of sort of 1 degree, 1 career. We have to start unlearning. That's one of the great skills you can develop. Start unlearning all the bad habits you had. Become an entrepreneur, because it's going to be king in an AI world where having a portfolio of different skills and not a single job will stand you in better stead. The old jack of all trades is a master of none, and everybody remembers that, but you forget about the second part is always better than the master of one. And I think if you read that as a total entity, you understand with AI coming why being a master of many is actually going to be better than a master of one. I think we're going to move away from a centralized world. Hopefully, the globalists are trying to get a world together, but I think we'll move away where we'll be forced to be more interested in our country again, our state or county, our province, our city, and then within that, our community, our family and friends. And it will be better off for it. We don't need to be worried about the whole world all the time. We genuinely don't, because all it does is makes us play victims as this transition starts to happen into an AI world, or if we have economic issues. I want you to be a pioneer again, the resilient pioneer, and someone who can actually go out and make change in their lives first, and then people's after that. Remember the safety videos, right, on the airplanes, right? Put the oxygen mask on your face first, then help others. We have to do that with our lives again. We're suffering from cognitive overload. That's something else, right? This leads to paralysis, anxiety, and a feeling of being stuck. Even when we know we should be moving. The easiest solution is aggressive ignorance. I love that, aggressive ignorance, by choosing not to care about every news event that happens every second around the world. Become deplatformable. I can't even say that. Deplatformable, right? Your skills, your physical health, and your direct relationships are things no subscription service can turn off. Focus on your survival efforts, on building equity in things that actually control your life. For example, a small example, being able to play a vinyl record again is so wonderful for me. It's slow, it forces patience. You cannot skip ahead to the next song just with a button. It makes you listen to songs that you don't really like, and therefore you listen to things that you can offset against without being able to skip forward. You discover the ability to analyze things differently, and you're not being force-fed shit like a goose, that's been fattened up for foie gras. And I think we just happen to have a perfect opportunity to look inward again. I think to become human again, rather than individuals, hooked up to dopamine machines that are in our pockets 24/7. The cushion between us and the realities of life has all but disappeared. Being constantly switched on to every detail, every second. It's destroyed the neural pathways that allow us to sit alone on a bench in a forest for an hour without distraction, sitting quietly to make sense of our lives. In the old world, institutions like school, the company, your church provided that cushion. Today, the cushion is gone. It genuinely has. And you are your own institutions now. You're your own HR department for your mental health. You're your own R&D department. That's your education. And you're your own security department, and that is finding a community that you can fit into. It's a lot of weight to carry, but it's the ultimate form of agency. I can carry on talking for a lot of different issues that are changing our world, or have changed our world since we all came into it. But we'd be here in eternity. And I think I know it seems dour, it seems negative and doom and gloom, and guess what? It has to be. Part of this channel is about awakening for everybody. It's about lifting your head from your comfort, your smiley, happy place in your comfort where you fit, eating sweets and candies and drinking beer. It's about understanding that the party's over. We've had a great crack of it the last 60, 70 years. Not all of us had the benefits. The new generations haven't. And we're in for some tough and messy times. And only the resilient, I think, are going to make it with a degree of comfort still. The thing about resilience, as I'll repeat on most of my videos, is resilience isn't about toughness or toughing it out. Resilience is about being able to take the knocks and stand up again. It's being able to see the knocks, know you're going to get knocked down, have no fear of it, and just stand up and carry on. And I think that's part of this, the secret to surviving in a world that's going to change and be so messy. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe and do all these wonderful things. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, I wish you peace and great beer.